Can you actually throw out your low back? Do your bones really just move in and out of place? In this episode, we'll talk about low back pain. There's a common misconception with low back pain in that whenever somebody experiences acute low back pain, they'll either say that they threw out their low back or that they maybe slipped a disc. And neither of these are good representations of what actually happens with low back pain. So generally when someone says that they threw out their back, they were doing something. So maybe they were bending down to tie their shoes, or they were picking something off of the ground, maybe they were gardening, or maybe they just twisted wrong. And sometimes they'll feel a pop in the low back and they'll think that either the vertebra has moved out of place or that they actually slipped a disc, meaning that the disc is now not where it should be. However, if we take a look at the anatomy, we can see that it's pretty unlikely that we can just throw out our back, especially under low loads, such as just bending over to tie our shoes or gardening and stuff like that. And so whenever we're talking about the low back, we're generally talking about the last 5 vertebrae. So 1, 2, 3, 4, and 5. Those collectively are called your lumbar vertebra. Underneath, we have the tailbone, which is called your sacrum. Over here, we have the ilium, which is also referred to as the hip bone. And so when someone says that they've thrown out their low back, they're talking about the vertebra. So the idea is that it's either shifted forwards, backwards, left, right, maybe it's rotated or something like that. But when we look at the anatomy, you're not just a skeletal structure. We have joint capsule, tendon, ligament, small muscles, big muscles, all supporting the structure. The thought that it's just a big stack of Jenga blocks where we can push it one way or the other is really an unlikely cause of low back pain. It would take a lot of force to be able to move these vertebrae out of place. And especially when we think about it, you have to first strain the muscles, right? You'd have to go through the muscles. You'd have to go and sprain the ligaments as well. And so all of that just to move the vertebra, probably not enough force of just bending down to tie your shoes, lifting something light off of the ground, or just simply twisting. You can irritate the structures here, but you're not misaligning them or putting them out of place or something like that. And this kind of goes into like the core, right? Of the core being able to stabilize everything. And so a lot of times we'll say that the low back is unstable as a reason for low back pain. However, most activities take less than 10% of your max strength to stabilize this core. And so you're generally pretty stable in that if you can only contract 10%, you can still do most of your things and still be stable enough. The research has also shown that if you contract your core, you increase your stability by somewhere between 35 and 65%, which translates to about 650 pounds of force that it can tolerate. And most activities where somebody has experienced low back pain, like I was saying before, you're not generating 600 pounds of force to overload the structure. Bending down to tie your shoes or something like that isn't 600 pounds of pressure. Even deadlifting, most cases, you're not putting that much force through the low back. So that's an unlikely reason why you would just slip a disc or misalign the back. It's not enough force to do it. If we look at a more extreme example of a misalignment in the spine, we can see why small misalignments aren't a good representation of the cause of low back pain. A spondylolisthesis is the name we give for a vertebra that's actually slipped forward. And so what happens is that the vertebra here has actually shifted forward a little bit, so it's not in line anymore, it's translated forward just a little bit. And if the idea of a misalignment causing low back pain, then the people with spondylolisthesis, they should be the ones with chronic low back pain and just maybe a lot of severe low back pain in general because it's a big misalignment of the spine. However, this doesn't seem to be the case. There's been quite a bit of research looking at all these cases, and there's quite a few people who are asymptomatic, meaning that they're pain-free, who have a spondylolisthesis in their low back. For example, I actually have a grade 1 spondylolisthesis in my low back, which just means that it's shifted a little bit forward. And before chiropractic school, I actually never knew I had one, but I've probably had it my whole life, yet I don't have low back pain. Now, I understand that I'm only one person and I could be a poor representation. However, the research has shown that there's quite a few other people like me who have a spondylolisthesis, yet they have no low back pain. For comparison, we can also look at the shoulder. So the shoulder is the most commonly dislocated joint. And if we look at just the architecture of the shoulder, it's a ball and socket joint. And so the common analogy is the golf ball on a tee, because the actual socket is very, very shallow and is not very big. So this isn't even a good representation of it because this is too big. But you get the idea in that it can move quite a bit. I mean, if we just look at the shoulder, it's got a lot of range of motion, and that's because it's a ball and socket. And so it's not that stable structurally, but it relies on a lot of muscular support, so rotator cuff and all the bigger muscles around the shoulder. When we look at the low back, it's a different type of joint. It's not a ball and socket joint. It's got a bunch of different articulations, so structurally it's much more stable than the shoulder, and it's got a lot of muscles surrounding it. And so if we're pressing up overhead, if we're lifting something up, we're generally not that concerned about throwing out our shoulder or dislocating it. It's because it's pretty strong as is, which means that the low back's even more stable. So in summary, your low back, it's not like a stack of Jenga blocks. It's actually much more stable than that. If you think about the Jenga block analogy, imagine wrapping a bunch of tape around it, and then more tape, and then duct tape, and then putting it in a box. That's how your low back is. Your low back's supported by muscles, ligaments, tendons, joint capsules, a bunch of stuff, which actually makes the low back a very robust structure. And so the idea that your low back would just pop in and out and all that kind of stuff isn't true.
Thank you guys so much for watching another episode of Monday Mornings with Michael. I hope that you guys found this information useful. If you did, please like this video and don't forget to subscribe. Until then, I'm just going to hold this plank until you go ahead and push subscribe. Go ahead and push subscribe. I don't know how long I can hold this plank. Just click that button right there.